Welcome to another episode of the Svarim Chatter podcast. I'm Nachi Weinstein. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Eli and Eva Genauer in memory of her mother, Mrs. Gertrude Offenbacher Haisha Gittel Bas Rebbe Eliezer. Mrs. Offenbacher was a Balas Chesed extraordinaire, as she was involved with the Kevurah Kadisha wherever she lived, in New Rochelle, Far Rockaway, the Upper West Side, and in her later years in Seattle, Washington. She taught many younger women the intricacies of doing things in the correct manner while being involved in this Chesed Shel Emes, and her influence is still felt today. May her memory be a blessing. To sponsor an episode or to support the podcast, please email svarimchatter@gmail.com or see the link and information in the show's notes below. You can also find links to subscribe to the Svarim Chatter WhatsApp community, where I post information about new Svarim, new books, book deals, and so on in the show's notes below. Additionally, if you can please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts on 24/6, Apple or Spotify, and if you can rate and review it, especially on Apple, and enjoy the episode. Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of the Svarim Chatter podcast. On this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be joined by R Yaakov Sofer, who is the mechaber of the newly published sefer Uve Meisam Lo Nifradu, which is Birurei Sugis Binyani Meisim Balacha V'Anhaga. So basically, talking about dead people in halacha and in hanhaga and action. So we'll speak about it. It's not only about dead people, I should say. It's about various inyanim about kevarim and davening there and different things about burial. We'll talk about it. So thank you, Rabbi Sofer, for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
So let's start off. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, so I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, went to yeshiva in England, in Manchester, learned in the Mir for 9 years by Rav Shlomo Levitz. I was in Netzach Yisrael, in Sha'ar Chesed, and then for the past 10 years, I have been in Baltimore, Ner Yisrael, in the Kollel Avodas Levi. And being in Baltimore, I've had the opportunity to give shiurim in this amazing program that they have, I believe, all over America, Agri de Perka. It's a program that they have for balabatim, either who are retired or have a flexible schedule where they can learn in the mornings. And what's unique about this program is that part of the program is that they like to bring in guest speakers every day with various shiurim, that it keeps the freshness and interest in the different topics. So being that I give shiurim, that I give the berach twice a month, so it's got to be a sort of a comprehensive topic because it's a one-time share, once every 2 weeks. And that's really how I got to giving these shiurim, because I gave them on various different topics. And when it came to this, this is really going to get into how I got to writing the sefer. Really, it begins with my father was nifter a couple of years ago, and it was coming up to the end of the year. And I was looking into, going to the kevarim, going to the kev at the end of the year, davening by kevarim. And while I was doing that, I realized that I have, in the shurim that I've given, a nice amount of material related to topics of Mason. And that's when the idea popped in my head that, it's coming to the end of the year. It may be a nice thing to put out a sefer, Le'ilun Nishmasei.
So you basically, it was some combination. I was going to ask you this, how you got to the sefer. Some combination of you would give shiurim anyways on various topics in this program, and then your father was nifty, you wanted to do something Le'ilun Nishmasei. So you ended up in this topic of Mason. And let me ask you also, as a follow-up, did you find a lack of svarim on this topic? Because I'm not super familiar with this topic, but it doesn't seem like it's something that there's a lot of svarim on. Your sefer is very comprehensive, as we'll get to.
Well, that was the idea, that I did not want to put out a sefer on typical topics, because that's not a sefer that anybody really needs or is so interested in. I wanted it to be something that has some purpose. It'll be something that people, today there are like 50 new svarim being printed every week. So who's going to be interested in looking at my sefer? So this was something that was an idea. I don't think that there are many svarim at all that are dedicated to this topic, that deal with these. These are not typical topics that people generally really work through. They're not so negay l'mais, or there are things that it's not the type of thing that people are so into. And that was part of the idea why I thought that this may be something that people will be interested in.
What was that process like, writing and researching these inyanim, these topics, which are not your standard?
So it's like any topic, really, because even topics that are your standard, I think that there is plenty to research and to find something new, a different way of looking at things. It's really any sugya, like I dealt with this like any other sugya. Really, when I give a share at this program, it's something that is generally related to the parsha or something like that, and you start looking around different svarim, and in a way, maybe this is even an easier. These were easier topics because these are things that are monogay in the paiskim. So when you start looking up in the paiskim, they start bringing different things, different svarim, and then you look those up, and you start looking around, and then eventually you formulate something, and Be'ezus Hashem, you have what to say.
So we're going to discuss shortly the topics in the Sefer that you discussed, but how did you pick what to talk about? Is that based on halacha, based on what's brought on halacha? That's what you pick, which sugyas to go through?
No, it was general. It was something that I came across, something negated to the parsha usually, or the truth is, it's each simon is something different. They probably each one has its own story. For example, the first simon that talks about kissing a mace. So that share I actually never said at this program. It was at my mother-in-law's first yard site, was Parshas Vayechi, and we had a Shabbos, and I'm married to the youngest child, so by the time I get to speak, there's really nothing more to say. So I had to find something that was relevant to the moment and something that would be, I guess, different to what everybody else was saying. And in Parshas Vayechi, I found this topic of Yosef HaTzadik kisses Yaakov Avinu when, after he dies. And we know that you don't generally kiss Mesim, and you find, and so you find Mefarshim that deal with this, with this. And this that's brought down in Paiskim not to kiss Mesim. So the Pischei Tshuva brings already that's Dafka children, but other Mesim is Mutter. And there are those who bring from Midrash Chazal, not typical ones that we have necessarily, that maybe there's a chiyuv to kiss a mace, and that's what I deal with in that first simon, trying to explain what would be that inyan, that Chazal would hold that there's actually a chiyuv to kiss the mace.
So that simon, taking that simon as an example, because that is the first one. So you deal with this question of kissing a mace halachically, hashkafically, like on haga, like which aspects do you deal with? Agada?
A mix of both. It's really a mix of both. I personally, my approach to these type of things are that there's not really a major difference between halacha and agada. I try to put them all together. I believe that they are obviously connected. There's it's real. If it's real, then you got to deal with it as something real. So there's going to have to be a hezbollah. It's going to have to be related to something agadic, but in a way, but it's not just the pure machshava, but it's something in a way that's going to come and explain the halacha aspect.
Right, which makes sense. Okay, so that's the first simon. And of course, we're just gonna, generally talk about some of these topics, maybe some more in depth if they're more interesting, or what I presume listeners will find interesting. Of course, you can check out the Sefer. I'll try to include a link at the end where you can purchase it. It should be available in Svarim stores, etc. But for obviously you want more in depth, check out the Sefer. But the next simon, you have a couple of small. It's a simon with anafim. So you have kind of what's the word I'm looking for? You have like kind of not subtopics, but you have like subheaders. So you have this, it's kind of bigger, the next one, which is in Kevurah b'karka b'aron. So burying in the ground or above the ground. I don't know, mausoleum or something, not necessarily, because that could be in the ground, but above ground burial. So what's that whole topic? How'd you come to that topic? And could you speak a little bit about that topic?
Okay, so that topic was negate to the parsha. I actually bring it in through the klichemda on that parsha, Parshas Chayesara. And that's a sugya that's Mefursha sugya in Masechtas Sanhedrin. And there's a big machlokes Rishonim in how to learn that sugya there. So the Rambam, which is brought in the Torah and Shulchan Aruch, he holds that what you see in the mitzvah of Kevurah B'Karka is that there's a chiyuv, there's a mitzvah to bury directly in the ground. He brings from Rab Natarayi Gayan that this that you find that they would bury in Arainais, he says they first buried in the ground because the Ramban learns that the mitzvah to bury in the ground is because that is the refuah for the guf to decompose in the offer itself, the ela offer tashuv, and therefore he holds that they would in certain places, depending where the earth was moist, so there they would put them in the earth first, then they would decompose. After 11, 12 months, they would take the bones, put them in the aron, and then put the aron in the kuchin. And then there's no issue with aron anymore, because the purpose of burying in the ground, according to this understanding, is just for the ikul abasa. And that's why you find the atzomis in the arenas. That's according to the Ramban. But other Rishonim don't hold of this, like the Ram learns in the sugya that the inyan of burying in the ground, the mitzvah to bury in the ground is just the inyan of geniza. Doesn't necessarily need to be buried in the ground itself. He does bring that al pi the medrash, there's an inyan to bury in the ground directly because of this refuah, but that's not part of the mitzvah of Kevurah B'Karka. That's according to the Ran. Then we bring, so I really go through this sugya as a regular sugya with all the lamdas of the different rishonim, the back and the forth, and but just the shittas that come out is there's another shittas haravan that understands that we have sort of we have like a riboy. So the Ravan understands that the ikar mitzvah is to bury that you should bury in an aron. And then that aron should be buried in the ground. He holds that there's a mitzvah dafka in an aron. And we actually bring that there are common places in Zayar and other places where there are makairas that there's an inyan to bury dafka in an aron shel eitz, which is also like the lashon of the Rambam. Only that the Rambam brings it as minig ga'elam. This is the minig to bury in an aron shel eitz, put that aron shel eitz in the ground. So that's what really comes out. It's a big machlokes. The Shulchan Aruch seems to pass on the chatchila like the Ramban. B'diavad, the Ramban holds that there's no issa, there's no baltalin if someone would bury an aron in the ground, but ideally it should be buried without an aron. And that's why they try to, and this that they do in some places, that they would pull out the bottom of the aron, that's the eitzah that the Ramban gives, to pull out the bottom of the aron. Other places, they would just make a nekev in the aron, or do things like that. There is a minhag brought in the Paiskim to put cheres, which is a form of afar, on the eyes, so that itself is also sort of, even in the aron, there's afar, so that's called being buried in the afar and dealing with that issue. The one other shita that really, if you learn through all of the anafim, then it comes out. You get to see what shitas Rashi and Rabbeinu Hananel is. And there it seems like they hold that there is no mitzvah to bury dafka in the ground itself. That's not a mitzvah. That's not, it's the mitzvah of Kevurah. It's the mitzvah of Kevurah, even an aron would be considered Kevurah. There's another inyan to put to bury in the ground, but that's not necessarily the mitzvah. And this is what really takes us to the section of burying above the ground, for a skaimus or in a mausoleum. Shittas Rashi is that it will be all right. It seems like from Rashi, from the lashon of Rashi, that when you have these different gemaras that talk about kevabinyan, Rashi always learns that means above the ground. And I didn't get really into this. I just brought the Rashi Prakim, but Paiskim deal with is if it's mechubal karka, is that considered in the ground? That gets into a sugya of Talash L'B'Sav Chibro. So these are big sugyas that are negeya to all of this, to this big shaila. And this, I guess, is more of a shaila in Eretz Yisrael. This is a common shaila, where it's common already in the 80s. They were building, because of lack of space, they were building these huge buildings above the ground, They connected it to the ground. They connected it to the offer of the ground. They have a pillar inside with offer that's connected to the ground, that's connected to every kever, and what they call Kvuras Kaimes, the levels. And that's a big sugya. I touch on it a little bit. I bring a little bit of Marma Kaimes, but really I was focused more on the Etzem sugya, where this all comes from, and I didn't go so much into the detail. I was contacted by a young man in Eretz Yisrael a couple of weeks ago, and he told me he bought my sefer, and he asked me for some of the makiras that I had quoted there, and he's in the middle of actually writing a complete sefer just on Kvuras Kaimes. He's dealt with all of the issues. He's got the pictures. He goes down there, and that's a real comprehensive sefer on that topic.
Right. For you, it's just one subpart of the of the sefer, of the second siman. Okay, the next siman is pretty interesting, which is Inyan Kvuras Tzaddik Eisel Russia, burying a tzaddik next to a Russia. It's interesting. You don't know what about burying if you're bringing a Russia next to a tzaddik, but let's
same thing.
Yeah, I figure it would be the same thing.
Right.
It shouldn't be different. So let's talk about this. An Isser, if there's a hefsig, what's this sugya? You can talk a little bit about this one.
Okay, so this one is actually interesting because the reason why I mean, this is a topic that there are many parshas where this can come up, but honestly, the reason why I did go into this was because it was Negei Lamaisa. I was dealing with this Lamaisa at the time. My wife's grandfather, R Yaakov Weinberg, who was the Rosh Yeshiva here in Israel, is buried in an old Beis Eilam near Rav Ruderman. So this actually brings us to other topics in the Sefer here. This, I guess, in 1942, Rav Ruderman's father-in-law, Rav Sheftel Kramer, was visiting here in Baltimore for a Einikel's bris, and he had an appendicitis attack, and he was nifta here in Baltimore. So he was buried in a Beis Eilam, which was one of the local, I guess it was maybe something that was connected with the shul where Rav Ruderman was the Rav. Later on, Rebbetzin Ruderman wanted to be buried near her parents. So they bought plots near her parents. So later on in the Sefer, I actually talk about Kever Mishpacha. The inyan of Kever Mishpacha, and is the Kever Mishpacha with Ishtay? It's a shayla if Ishtay is called Kever Mishpacha or not. And here there was a shayla, there was a ma'isa that Rav Ruderman was able to get a Kever in Eretz Yisrael on Har HaZeisim right near the altar of Slobodka. Rav Simchas Yisrael Breda was an anikel of the altar and a close friend of Rav Ruderman. He was masada this for him, and he was actually very excited about it. But then he had second thoughts. Maybe Kever Mishpacha near his wife is more important. So he sent my shvet to Rav Shach, and Rav Shach told him that Kever Mishpacha is more important. Although you can argue that the altar was also Kever Mishpacha, he was like a Talmud Muvach, like a Ben, but that's what Rav Shach held. So they are buried over there. So Rav Ruderman already arranged that they put a fence. This is an old Beis Eilam. Many kehillas over time. I don't know if they were Shemesh Shabbos then or things got worse later, but it's a Beis Eilam that is not only Shemesh Shabbos. Either they or their children, grandchildren are Reformed, conservative. I don't know where they're holding. So they already put a gate around the kevarim of Ruderman and his in-laws, the Kramers. And Rabbi Weinberg got kevarim right opposite Ruderman's kever. So there was never a gate put up, and I was working on that to try and arrange that. And it was just a question of exactly how much do you have to put around, and could it be saimach on different colors and things like that. And that's why I got into this sugya of Tzaddik Etzor Russia. So Tzaddik Etzor Russia's Pashta system of Yerusha Gemara, it's a Mishnah, also in Sanhedrin, that says that they had two Batei Gemaras, right? There was a Batei Gemaras for Nechnokim and Nisgalim, for Nechnokim and for Chenek and Saif. Where's this? Just a minute. And one for those who will have skila and shreif. So in the Gemara we say, although we bring some Makiris, but we end up saying in the Gemara Gemiri law, Rashi says it's a halach lo meishim esinai. The Chasam Sofer says therefore we treat it as a dairaisa. If there's any safek, we have to go l'chumra. But what is interesting is that the Rambam does not bring this halacha. It is brought in Shulchan Aruch, but not in the Rambam. So the Chassan Sofer says that the Rambam holds that it's only a din by those those who are narrowing. By Rosh Gomel, different level of Rosh. That's where it's halacha Moshe Messina. Rashi also sounds like that. In other places in Yavamas, Rashi says also we have there that there's we have a Gemara that Rav Yossi says that if there's a Eishes Ach who is also a Ches Isha, so you're chayiv for both. And the Gemara says, but he holds Eines Achalalisa. Says the Gemara Nafkamina L'Kayre Ben Rishon Gemurin. So Rashi says they're both chayiv krisos, right? There's no chiyuv bezdin here. So he says, but because this person was over two chayiv krisos, we put him by those niskalim v'nisrafim. Taisa says that it's enough to bury him by people who are over two chayiv krisos as opposed to one chayiv krisos. So you see that Rashi is going the way that some people in the Rambam, that this is a din dafka by harugei bezdin. Harugei bezdin, we have to have two separate bate kevaris. And here the Gemara says someone who was chayiv, he was over on two chayiv krisos, we bury him by those neherogim. Taisa says that this applies to everybody. So it would seem that although the Shulchan Aruch paskins this by anyone, and we have different Gemaras that even a tzaddik etzel chassid, you can't bury that didn't work. So that's how it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, also based on the Rambam. He brings all of these Gemaras, and that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. But it seems like Rashi and the Rambam don't necessarily hold of this whole thing at all, that you have to be makbid. But Lamaisa, the Shulchan Aruch brings it, and the Paiskim take it very seriously, and the Yamsha Shloimeh screams at those that they sell the rice to be buried near a tzaddik. He says, "What's going on over here? This is not good for the tzaddik. It's not good for the Rasha, or not even Rasha. It's not good for the Pashat person." Yeah, so that's where this din comes from. The issue becomes with when it does, if it did happen, or if there's a tzarech for whatever reason to bury someone there, like in our case, kevem mishpacha. So, is there any eitz? Is there anything to do about this? So, this is a big machlokes achrayim. I mean, the Ramami Pana says that putting a mechitza doesn't help. The Minchas Alaza screams also putting a mechitza above ground definitely doesn't help. What's that going to help for the mason below, that they are still together there? There's nothing being mafsik between them. So it's a big machlekes, and the others say that there's a mashmos and Sefer Chasidim that it does help to put a mechitza. So that's a whole discussion over there. If it does help, if it does not help. Many Paiskim hold the Maisa that it does help, and the basic way of dealing with it is either we don't understand exactly the issue of Mason being next to each other, and if a mechitza, if you have a makar and say Chasidim, that mechitza helps. He understood the Kabbalah aspect of what's going on, and it does help. The other thing that is a very important nakuda, which really comes up later on in the sefer also, that that the nefesh of a person, especially of a tzaddik, there's a chelik of the nefesh that stays on top of the kever. So one of the Paiskim say we are talking about what we are trying to be mafsek here is not a hefsek between the gufim. We care to be mafsek between the nefesh that is residing on top of the kever. When we talk about that when you learn when you learn dvarim of a tzaddik, sifseisav deva beis bakever. Where are the sifseisav deva beis bakever? There's no sifseisav. The person has already decomposed. But it's the nefesh that is on top of the kever that there are sifseisav deva beis, and there are makairas in Rishonim and in Zayar that they come in the Megala, the Rozei Teira, and the Seidos to these nefashas. There are mashmos and Gemara also. So memela, it's enough to be mafsek between the kevarim above ground. So that's really the second section of this simon, and the third section is what I wanted to be mechadash here, was that that if we can create a reshus, it's not just a question of making a mechitza between the kevarim, but if we can put at least 3 mechitzas, which is a reshus l'inyan Shabbos, or an oil, like you find by the oil by a tzaddik, that's already a reshus. And I discuss over there if you can say that a reshus is yered ad l'tahain. Mechitzas above ground, we know that good. You know that reshus hayachid oila ad l'rakia. So the question is, do we say that reshus hayachid oila ad l'tahain? So that's the question that we deal with over there. And I actually found at the end that the Shevet HaLevi says that that's taka the pshat in an oil over a tzaddik. By an oil, for sure, we have makairis, mapurushim makairis. That a bias, once it's an oil, we do say that reshus is yered ad l'tahain, and therefore it's as if there's a mechitza, it's a different reshus even below the ground.
So I think the next part of the Sefer is probably the part that's most negea to most listeners, most interesting, which is this it's the next 2 parts. One is Inyan Biger Kvarim, one is Inyan Tefillah Eitzel Kvarim. So going to visit Kvarim and then, going to actually davening by the Kvarim. So let's split them up. Let's first talk about what you talk about visiting Kvarim, and then we can talk about the davening at the Kvarim.
Okay, so visiting Kvarim, it's really a big sugya, and I don't know that I did it justice the way I presented it here in the Sefer, because it's really related to other topics. I mean, it really begins. The way to really start this sugya would be to begin with what I have in Simon Dalit about, do Mesim know what's going on, right? Because you have Gemaras that the neshama is oila v'yored until Yud Beis Chodesh, at Yud Beis Chodesh it goes up and it doesn't come back down. So then what's left over here? What are you going to? Who's there? What's here? So the Rishonim Taisvus over there and in other places assumes that there's nothing there. This has to do with that sugya of the Mesim know what's going on, because Taisvus in Saita understands that l'maskonas sugya in brachas, Mesim don't know what's going on. So Taisvus says, why did Kalev go daven by the Maras HaMachpeil? They don't hear, they don't know what's going on in this world. That's Shittas Taisvus. I believe the Rif and the Rambam hold like this also, because they don't bring the halacha of putting the tzitzis in and not letting your tzitzis drag on the kvarim because of Leig Larash, which is the whole sugya there. If Mesim know what's going on, they seem to hold that l'maskanas hasugya. They don't know what's going on, like Shittas Taisvus. So if they don't know what's going on, what are you davening by kvarim for? What are you going there for? So Taisvus in Saita says that when a person davens by a kever, the malachim would be meidia the mace what you daven there. Taisvus in Shabbos, when he talks about, the neshama goes back up after Yud Beis Chodesh, never comes back down, but you have Gemaras that sound like they do come back down. There are Gemaras that talk about that they were digging and they hit into a grave and the person started speaking to them. There's somebody there. Says Taisvus, well, when they want, they could come back down. But it sounds like generally they don't come back down. They are not there. So even more, the Rambam, this is interesting, that the Rambam, he's talking about the kevarim of tzaddik. He says that ein oisim lefashos letzaddikim, their ma'isama, their zikaron. And then the Rambam says a lashon, the ein painim. Let me just see the lashon. The Rambam says that ein painim baris. The Rivash has another girsa. Now, many bring this as a raya, but the Rambam holds that you should not go to Kvarim. You don't go to Kvarim. You shouldn't go to Kvarim. Now, the next Kalim, the Radbaz, they both say, what do you mean? So the Neisakalim in the Radbaz Kesef Mishnah, they say, what do you mean? It's Miniga Eilam and all the Gemaras that we have that sound like we do go to Kvarim. It can be that the Rambam means that you don't go to Kvarim. So they deal with what the Rambam would mean over here. However, according to our understanding, what we said, we have Mefurish and Taisvus that he has this problem. Why do you go to kevarim? What are you going to kevarim for? There's no one there. The neshama comes down. The first Yud Beis Chodesh is Oila B'Yayin, but after Yud Beis Chodesh it leaves. Says Taisvus. Sometimes it comes back down. But if the Rambam holds like that, also would make a lot of sense. The Rambam also holds don't go to kevarim. Now the emes is that in Shulchan Aruch, it's based on the Ramban and Teresa Adam, who brings it from the Ge'ainim, that people should go to the kever after 3 days, after 7 days, and after 30 days, and after Yud Beis Chodesh. That's all that's brought in Shulchan Aruch. There is no other makar in Shulchan Aruch about going to kevarim after that. There is about going on a tainus, but that's already a Gemara in tainus, that maybe it's not necessarily for the mason, but it's the mace, it's only till the Beis Chodesh. Rav Chaim Kanievsky, they bring in Derech Sicha, that they asked him about going to kevarim, keva avos on the yard side and things like that. And he said to them, Shulchan Aruch only says Yud Beis Chodesh. After Yud Beis Chodesh, there's no Indian. There's no Indian that's brought. And he brings from his father didn't go to the Chazon Ish's kever, to his mother's kever on their yard side. The Chazon Ish said it's better to learn than to go to a kever. And Reb Chaim said, I do go because of that's why I go. But it seems like Reb Chaim held, Shulchan Aruch doesn't say anything. There's no reason to go afterwards. The Prisha also has a deal in the Shulchan Aruch that he holds that possibly there's no need to go after Yud Beis Chodesh. But as we said, the Radvaz and the Ribosh and everybody learn different. They learn this Rambam differently. They deal with the Lashon and the Rambam, and they say it's always been a minhag ha'olam. Everybody goes to kevarim. That's minhag ha'olam. We go daven by kevarim whenever there's any tzara, and it's basically based on the Zayar. The Zayar is pretty mefurish about going to kevarim, and the Zayar says in different places the nefesh stays by the kever. There's a nefesh always there by the kever. So there is a chelik there, and the nefesh is obviously connected to the ruach, which is in Gan Eden HaTachtain, and the neshama in the Gan Eden HaElyon. So there is what to daven by the kever, to be ma'ira the nefesh, to be ma'ira the ruach, to be ma'ira the neshama, and then to go daven the Fnei Kissing. Now, what's interesting is I don't have this in the Sefer. I just saw this Parshas Chukas, the Malbim in Parshas Chukas. He is going with all the Zayas. He quotes the Zayas and still says that the Ruach is in Gan Eden HaTachtain only until Yud Beis Chodesh. Everybody quotes the Zayar that the Ruach is in Gan Eden HaTachtain for always. That's where the Ruach stays. And the Nefesh stays by the Kever. The Malbim, I don't know where his Makir is, but he says that the Ruach is only in Gan Eden HaTachtain for Yud Beis Chodesh. After the Beis Chodesh, there's nothing left anymore. Everything goes up to Gan Eden HaElyon, and there's nothing left down here, which would be machazak those who are nayeg, that those who understand that there's taken nothing by the keva after Yud Beis Chodesh. So that's one part of the sugya. The sugya then continues with all those that hold that there is something there. So first of all, it's the Rishonim say different things. Some say that there is a cheluk of the nefesh that stays in the atzamais la'olam. The Ramchal says that there's something that stays there, and that's what is going to be able the person to have tchias hamesim. Some say that there's a nefesh bahamis stays by the kever. Some say that there's a cheluk of the nefesh ruchni that stays by the kever. We know that the Mishnah Masechta Shkolim calls the matzeva nefesh. So the Ramafoshim say because that's where the nefesh connects to. That's the mokam nefesh. So there are many mikayros for all of this. As we said, the Zohar says that it stays there, and the minhag ha'olam seems to be that we go to kevarim. There's another Indian over here. There's another sugya here that the Magen Avraham brings from the Arizal, that the Arizal held not to go to kevarim. He himself went, but he held that it's not good for regular people to go to kevarim because of all the chitzainim, all of the ruach hatuma that's shayra around by kevarim, And that is mizdabek in a person who goes, and especially about carry, if he has not been matayr himself, but even someone who has been matayr himself, so they speak out that anyone who ever saw carry is also going to be more affected. I guess the reason we never saw carry, he would not be affected. And they bring, so the Gra held very stark of this Indian. The Gra, in the letter that he wrote to his wife and his daughter, to his wife and his mother, he wrote that they should not go to Kvarim, because all of the Ruach HaTumah, and this is the Shirish of all hate and all tsaras, come because of the his dabkas that a person has with these chitzainim. And he wrote they should never go. And they bring that the Gra once went with his brother on his mother's yard site. And when they were there by the Kevurah, he says to his brother, I see our mother, and I see she is b'simcha gedayla that we are here. A while later, he tells his brother, I have charot gemura that we ever went. So his brother says, but you said that our mother was so happy. He says, yes, she was very happy, but I have charot that I went. And they bring over there that from then on the Gra never went to Kvarim. And that's taka, the minig in Litan, many places was that they don't go to Kvarim. I don't know if the minig was dafka because of this Indian of the Arizal of the Gra, or because of another problem, which is what we mentioned that comes up in the next sermon, the issue of the Yerusha Mason. So if it's because of the Yerusha Mason that you're asking from Mason, this would really depend on what's the purpose of going to Kvarim. Are you going to Kvarim to daven for the mace, l'tevas hameis, or are you going to Kvarim to daven for l'tevas hachayim? If we go l'tevas hachayim, so then it can look like there can be problems that could lead to the Yerusha Mason. But if you're going to daven for the mace, like on a yard site, so then there shouldn't be any issue of the Yerusha Mason. So I had to bring down that I spoke to David Kamenetsky. He said that in the Kamenetsky family, the minig is that they go to Kivurah only on the yard site. They don't go any other time. And the reason for that is because of the issue of the Yerusha Mason. Meaning, if you're going on the yard site, you're going to daven for the mace. But if you're going to be going any other time, anytime that a person has a tzara, they need any Yeshua, they're going to go daven by the Kivurah, that already is going to lead to the issue of the Yerusha Mason. So it could be one of these two issues, either because of the Yerusha Mason issue or because of the Gra. But in Lita, in many places, Shach they bring down never went to Kvarim. He went to Levi's, but not to Kvarim. And when I was giving the share, there was an older gentleman there that his father was from Grodno, and he said that he heard from his father that they were noig, even on the yard site Kivurah, they never ever go to Kvarim. I heard in Tells that they didn't go to Kvarim, and many different places. It seems like in Lita, generally the minute was that they did not go to Kvarim. But a chashav and makar that I do bring here is that Rav Ruderman also was obviously not a big Kvarim goer, but he did go occasionally to Kvarim. I know that he went in the 20s when his wife was sick in Kenningsburg. He went to the Kev of Yisrael Salanta. When he went to Eretz Yisrael later on in the 60s, he went to Tzfas, he went to places. So I found one Talmud that actually had the conversation with him, and he told him that the minig in Litatak was not to go, but after he read from the Yad Eliyahu, from Rav Eliyahu Regola, who was from the Grace Litvisha Talmud of the Gra, and he saw that he was naive to go to Kvarim. He sent people to Kvarim when there were tzaras, when they needed Yeshuas. He went to Kvarim. That he changed his whole shita in this topic. Meaning, when you have Azai Brisa Pesach, and he was a big makubal also. So that's already a shtickle hamakari for those that are opposed to going to Kvarim. That is yeshamal lismai to go to Kvarim. However, there's one chashav idea that the Shevet HaLevi writes that the Rambam writes v'lo yafana lebeis hakvaris. So even the way that the Rivash wants to learn that v'lo yafana lebeis hakvaris means that it's a hemshach of what the Rambam was talking about. The Rambam was talking about kibrei tzadikim. We don't have to make a big monument on top of their kever. That's not what is their zeicha. Their ma'asim are their zeicha. Don't go and be mefana and look towards the Beis HaKvaros to see what there is for that tzaddik and to connect to the tzaddik and the Beis HaKvaros. Because their meisim are their zeicha. So Zok the Shevet HaLevi that this is a makor, that it's wrong for those who are running around from kevarim to kevarim and they spend all their days going foreign, traveling from different places all over Europe. He says that's not the way to connect to a tzaddik. A person needs a Yeshua, a person can go occasionally, but he says, but what we could take out of this Rambam, according to everybody, is that v'lo yifan al beis hakvaros, that's not how you connect to a tzaddik. You want to connect to a tzaddik, better learn his Torah. So that's what the Shevet Levi takes out of this.
Yeah, it's definitely reminds me of the listeners will be familiar when I did a live pod. I was in Europe a few months ago, and I did a lot of. I don't know when this podcast will be posted, but when I did the podcast, then I spoke about the being in Pressburg and having the Bratislava and being impacted from seeing Rabbi some surface kever and Mishol Igor's kevers over there. It's a broken kever, and besides for the fact that the kever is broken, but I was just this Paul Mishol Igor knowing this farm and not in print. Maybe they are. Everyone can maybe the truth.
A little more these days, right?
It is. Nobody uses it in the Svarim. That's the Iker. Regardless, that's the Iker. You still have the Gedolim. They're still talking to us in the Svarim, and that's the main thing. It's trying with that to do a project. I'm sure Svarim. I have to get back to that. But
it definitely has become very popular in the past 20 years. Uman has become a lot larger.
Yeah,
Kevarim.
Yeah,
everything. Now that's another good point. You mentioned Reb Shayla. So when I wrote the Sefer, I thought, we're dealing with the Shayla of Yerusha Rabbanus, and the heta, those that are makel in this Indian about davening directly to a mace, is because they hold, obviously you're not davening and asking the mace for anything. He doesn't have any independent kayach, but you're asking him to be a melitz yasha. A melitz yasha means that he should go on my behalf and go and be mispaler. We have in the Zayah, we know that's what Mason do. The Zayah says that the world cannot exist even half a day without the Tfilas HaMason. So Mason are doing that anyway. So what am I asking? I'm just being ma'ayra the Mace to be nis'ayra and be mispaler for me and be a melitz yasha. So that is the heter. That's what many paiskim are saying, that you can daven directly to a mace. They don't hold up these issues. Derech Shalamesim, we can talk later about what the issue of Derech Shalamesim is. But that's not an issue to ask him just to be a melitz yasha. After that, I had a bocher that ate over by me, and he tells me a story. He says his uncle went to Rav Shayla, and he had three things that he held with Lamal B'derech HaTeva. He had no havamina that they're going to happen, but he went to Rav Shayla and he asked for these three things. Within a year, all three things were in a sky. He went a second year and asked for another three things. And again, these were three things that he did not think can happen. And again, all three things happened. So the Bacha tells me, I have to go. I'm going to make sure to go on the yard site. He tried to get rishus from his Rebbe. His Rebbe didn't give rishus. Okay. But what I realized was that the language that people use when they talk about going to daven by a tzaddik is almost like when like when a person goes to a life tzaddik, he's a payil yeshuas, so he's got keiches. I can go and ask him for anything, and he can be payil yeshuas. So this chashash that people may come to think that they are actually talking to the mace and asking the mace that he's got kayach, he's a payil yeshuas, he's got independent kayach. Hashem gave him the kayach, but he has the kayach, and I can ask him for things. That may be a real Derech Shalamesim, because they are not thinking that what I'm really doing here is that I'm asking him to be melitz yasha by HaKadosh Baruch Hu and daven that I should have atzlocha and these things. If you would stop them and ask them, maybe they would tell you that's what they're thinking. But this is definitely a big chashash that the Hamoyin Am, if this is how people speak, that I need a Yeshua, I need something, so I'm going to go ask Reb Shayla for it. And he's a payil yeshuas. He, whatever you ask, he gives you. The way that they talk, that terminology, can definitely be a big chashash of people actually being Derech Shalamesim manch.
And right, and that's a problem. And you hear the way people talk.
Now, Hasidim are not worried about that. I think they don't. They hold you can even do that.
So that's
Some
what I want to
Hasidim
get
maybe
into.
don't know.
Because exactly, you hear people talk about that. I think also we should walk back. The first part, as I think of this, is that we didn't really get into, which you do talk about, is can you daven to the mace? I mean, that's kind of what you were just saying there. Can you daven to the mace, or do you have to ask the mace to? Can you even then? Can you daven directly to the mace? Or do you ask the mace to go be melitz for you, or do you just go to the kever and you daven? You don't ask the mace. Go and be. Forgetting the fact of, are you asking what you were just saying? There's really like, it's like split. It's, are you asking the mace for something? Are you asking the mace to go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and be melitz for you? Or are you just davening by the kever? You're not asking the mace to do something for you.
Correct. So that's really that's really the whole sugya. That the Pashtus and Gemara sound like the way Chazal talk in the Aggadah language is that they will talk directly to the mace. So there are many Mefarshim that are never too bothered by the Lashon and Agada. It's Lav Dafka, it's just the way that it's being presented, but it doesn't mean that they spoke directly to the mace. All it means is that they davened in the schus of the mace. That would be one way that they want to deal with it. But there's really two issues that are brought up in the Paiskim. One is based on the Rambam in Yisrael HaChamishi, that Pnei El HaMeisim is a question of Avodah Zarah. A chai is a Baal Bechira. You can ask him for something. You can be painted to a Adam chai. But anything else, a Malach, a Mace, is the Shaila of Avodah Zarah. So that's Pnei El HaMeisim. I'm going and asking Mason for anything. And according to this, they would hold even to ask the Mace to daven. I guess that before Kevurah, you can ask him to be a Melitz Yesha. But after Kevurah, it's a Pnei El HaMeisim. So that's one issue. The other issue that's brought up in the Rishonim already is Derish Al HaMeisim, that it's a question of being Derish Al HaMeisim. Now, Derish Al HaMeisim itself, I go into this a little bit, that it's not so posh what Derish Al HaMeisim means. Derish Al HaMeisim and the Rishonim sound like it's only somebody who connects with the Shindalar of the Beis HaKvaris, according to Rashi, or according to others, it's someone who connects with the Keichas Atumah. The Levush says that Derish Al HaMeisim, the issue is that there are Keichas Atumah which are mizdabek in the guf. Once the guf is not anymore a makom which contains the kedusha of the neshama, so these chitzanim want to connect with something that had that kedusha, and Derish Al HaMeisim is connecting with those Keichas Atumah. Therefore, says the Levush that if you would direct your tefillah to the nefesh, there is no problem of Derish Al HaMeisim. And he's coming off the Shulchan Aruch that sounds like there may be a makar even in Shulchan Aruch to something like this. And the Pri Megadim brings this Levush, and he says that in the nusach of the tefillahs that we have when we daven by the kevarim, he says the lashon is mashma that we are davening directly to the mace. So he says pshat would be like the Levush says that we are directing our tefillah to the nefesh, and that's mutter. There's no issue to daven to the nefesh. That's not an issue of Derish Al HaMeisim. So although the Bach and Rav Chaim Patil and all these Paiskim hold that there's an issue with davening to a mace, and that's brought in the Chai, and the Maril has this issue, and the Maral, and the Chai Odom brings this la'alocha, and the Matafraya, Mishnah Brura, they all go with this issue that it's also to daven to a mace. But you have the Pri Megadim already pointing out that the nusach that we have in the tefillas, davening by kevarim, sound like we're davening to Mesim, and Rav Elyashiv in Seidim Lamed in the Sugya of Kolev, davening by Marisa Machpelah, he brings this Pri Megadim, and he says that that the minhag ha'olam is that generally most kehillas say Machnise Rachamim. We daven to malachim, so pashtus they are the same sugya. They don't have to be mamish the same sugya, but there's pashtus the place can deal with it as the same sugya. So Zot Rav Elyashiv is a raya that the minhag ha'olam is to pass like this Pri Megadim that it's mutter to daven to the mace. So although usually we all know psak of Mishnah Brura, you don't daven to the mace, but there are poskim that hold that you could. The B'tzalach Chachma brings a raya from the Lashon of Seif Chasidim that you can direct your tefillah to the mace, the Kavayashim, very chashav b'makoir, says mefurish, a person has a tzara, you should go to the kever and be meidia yotzar to the mace. So you see that there are many mekairos that it's okay to daven directly to the mace. But again, the Paiskim are only speaking about over here to ask the mace and be ma'ir the mace to be a melitzation, to go and daven for me, but not to ask the mace to do something for me, thinking that it has any independent kayach.
Okay, obviously there's a lot more in this sugya. We can go on. We can do just a podcast alone on this. So let's. I think we should move on, perhaps a little bit, and you can read in the Sefer, and I'm sure listeners probably can reach out to you to talk about more about this. I'm sure you went through more in the sugya, so there's more to discuss over there. There's a couple of other interesting things here in the Sefer to talk about. One that comes up is really the next part is you call it be'inin tzadikim enim b'tamim, so that a tzaddik doesn't make tameh. And this is an interesting sugya for a bunch of reasons. One being, can a kohen go to a kever of a tzaddik? Because does the tzaddik is he mitama or not?
Okay, so really, I bring at the beginning of this sermon that I've come across three nafkaminas. One nafkamina is, and there may be a difference, can a kohen be metame by the levaya of a tzaddik? Second, like you said, can a kohen go and daven by kivrei tzaddikim? And the third, which is also interesting, which maybe is tail on this, is not tail on this, do they have to wash their hands when they leave the kever of a tzaddik? The minhag by Chabad, I bring down from some sefer, that the minhag by Chabad, this is there's an edus by the Balatanya went to the kever of Rev Levi Yitzchak right after he was nifter, and he didn't wash his hands. They asked him, why are you not washing your hands? He said, kivrei tzaddikim einam metamim. And they said that the Hasidic Chabad, when they go to the Tzemach Tzedek and to the Rashab, the minhag is you don't wash your hands afterwards. So that's how they bring down kivrei tzaddikim einam metamim. The question is if this really has with kivrei tzaddikim einam metamim. Rav Rivkin, who was a choshev Chabad, he questions it. We don't pass in kivrei tzaddikim einam metamim. At least by Hasidic Chabad, they are not noyeg that the Kehanim go to kevarim. So his point was there that he didn't really mean kivrei tzaddikim einam metamim. It's that he holds there's no ruach ra being shayra there. We're washing our hands not because of the tumah. Tumas meis, you need azor and shvi. So the reason why we're washing our hands is because of ruach ra. So the ruach ra means that there are chitzayin that are being mizdabek over here. By tzaddikim, the kerichas atuma are not being mizdabek in the guf. But Thomas Mace is a different Indian, which I deal with the 5 different mahalchim in where Thomas Mace comes from, but they're assuming the pashtus is that it's anyone who's mace through the malach hamaves, that is what creates Thomas Mace. Thomas Mace, of course, there is. So the sugya really is, it's really a taste with Kayan. Says that if he would have been there when Rabbeinu Tam was nifta, he would have been matama to Rabbeinu Tam. That itself is a question: did he mean dafka to be matama by the levaya of Rabbeinu Tam, or did he mean that he would go to the kever as well? What's the nafkamina? Because it could be that there's a different heta here, not to do with tzaddikim einam matamim, but a nasi shemeis. Anyone that has a din of a nasi shemeis, then everyone's chayv to be mechaber him, and then that itself would be enough of a reason to be mevatel the issa kahuna. It could be that l'chvoida shal nasi the ramakairis that even a kain could be metame. So the place can deal with this. Who is called a nasi? Does that mean godel adar? Would that apply even today? Is that what Rav Chaim Kohen was saying, that he will be metame to Rabbeinu Tam? That Rabbeinu Tam would have had a din of nasi. Okay, but that's one shayla. But then it's mefurish machlekes or rishenim, the machlekes hatayzus in kama places, and the other rishenim bring it that can a kayan be metame to a mace? Do we say that the agodas that we find that Eliyahu Hanavi was metame to Rabbi Akiva? If he was a kayan, are we saying on that agoda that he says tadikim einam metame? So are we saying on that lahalacha? It's an agadata. Can we use that lahalacha or not? The Rambam goes with that. Ala Torah, he goes with this, and on the sugya. So that's really the big shayla. There are a bunch of rayas lakan. Different places you find that that those who didn't those Tamei and Nefesh that couldn't do Pesach Rishon, they were nitchel Pesach Sheni, so it's a machlekes in the Gemara. If they were metamet to the atzamas of Yosef or to Nadav Avihu, and both Nadav and Avihu and Yosef Atzadik, there are Mekayros in the Zayah and other places that they were Meis Ben Ashika. So they would have that din of tzaddik, they would have that mile of tzaddik, that tzaddikim and matamin. So how do you deal with that? That's one of the questions. And there are different gemaras and things that they all deal with, and there are dichuyim lakan of lakan, and that's basically the sugya there. It's too much detail to go into on a podcast, I think.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. So something you go into at length in the Sefer, and we'll leave the rest of it for the Sefer. Really, the rest of it, there's some interesting things that you get into at the end of the Sefer. They're not so. You wouldn't think that, the Sefer, again, we were talking about Mesim, dead people, cemeteries, type of thing. Now you get into a couple of other things. Siman Ches, you talk about Yerusha Rabbanus, so, taking over a Steller, I guess, of Rabbanus, Yerusha. Then you get into Yerusha's Bechar in general, the Yerusha of Bechar, Noilid Ben Zachar. And then there's a couple of other things, and then Hagdasha Sefer Torah Lila Neshama. I do want to talk about that. That's like a big thing now. Even if there's always campaigns going on for Sefer Torah, people writing Sefer Torah. We'll get into Sefer Torah in a second, but just quickly, briefly, I don't want to go super in depth. Why'd you include the Yerusha parts? And if you have anything that you wanted to just point out here.
Okay, so the reason was that as I told you, that when the idea came to mind to put out a Sefer Le'ilui Nishmas, my father, on this topic, I was thinking about different shtickles that I had given over the years that were related to Mason. So Yerusha is very much a part of Mason, but there's a little more there. The look that I had was like the name of the Sefer, Uve Mason Le'nefrod. So in the Psikha, I actually try to give a presentation of a overlook on how to view the inyan of Misa. And what's interesting is, and this is a common thread throughout the whole Sefer, and this is why this inyan of Yerusha really is very relevant, because so we know a person was really supposed to live forever. There was not supposed to be Misa, and there was Nigza Misa. The only tikkun that he can get is through Misa. The Ramban Teres Adam says that even after the Gezeira of Misa, a person is still naturally supposed to live forever. It's not pshat that the nature changed and now a person is not supposed to live forever. Al pi derech hatava, he shall live forever. It's against nature when a person dies. You see even more, this is something I talk about later in the Sefer, the Shittas Rashba, that when a person has died, it's not pshat that he's not shaykh to mitzvahs anymore, he's potem and mitzvahs. He's still a bar chiyuva, whatever the nafka minasar, ayin sham. But he's still be'etzem a bar chiyuva, he's poshet not in the mokum with mitzvahs anegeya. He can't be mekayim them, he's not in the mokum where it's shaykh to be mekayim mitzvahs, but he's still be'etzem a bar chiyuva. So you see that death is not something which is a disconnect from this world and from what was when he was alive. And that's what I go through, that he still stays connected to this world. All the makaris that we had, that the nefesh stays by the keveh, the ruach pashtus lefi desire stays in Gan Eden atachton ba'aretz la'olam vayed until tchias hamesim. Now, what you see afterwards with the inyan of Yerusha, it really begins with Yibum, which I get into by Sefer Torah there. What's the inyan of Yibum? So the Zayar and the other Makaris, the other Mefarshim speak out that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants a person to exist in this world forever. Shein Vaita, he should stay here in this world. He should have a Hemshech. He should have a Kiyum. And it's like a Mayon, it's a Mayon which is Nimshach. Others compare this to a tree that has constant peiros. So the Zayar says if the tree dries out, it's not Matzliach here, pick it up and plant it somewhere else. That's the inyan of Yibum. L'hakim shem la'achiv is a hemshech of the neshama of the mace. That's in of Yibum. So the person continues to live through his children. Yerusha is also the same thing. Yerusha, that's the chinuch says, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants the moment to blind by a person la'aylam. So he gives the mitzvah of Yerusha, which is memela, it goes over to his hemshech. And that's the inyan of Yerusha by Sorah Rabbanus. These sugyas bring out the same inyan, not only in his moment, but in his keichas hanefesh, in his positions And the whole Yisayid you see in the Masal Matan and the Sugi, you see that it has to do with a Memala Mokim. It's a hemshach of his mitzias. It's a hemshach of him. It's a bro karadavua, which is the schus Yerusha for somebody to take over a position that his father had. So it is relevant to the idea of the Sefer.
I'm sure it had a connection, but that's a good explanation. What about the Sefer Torah? Let's jump to the Sefer Torah L'il Neshama. You mentioned already Yibum. It comes up again. This is something that people today are very busy with, especially again. You see campaigns all the time, whether legit or not. That's a whole other thing. You see online people always running campaigns for people that you nifter to collect to write a Sefer Torah. What's the whole inyan of the Sefer Torah L'il Neshama?
Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of a background to this as well. My father was nifter. We are a Litvish family with one Hasidic brother. So the Hasidic brother immediately wants to write a Sefer Torah. So you can imagine the response he got from the entire family, including my mother, was not very supportive at all. My father was a Bahaltan Yid. He was an Edel Yid. He wasn't the type to put his name anywhere. He's got 10 living Sefer Torah. He doesn't need a Sefer Torah on his name. So he was nifter about Purim, and right after Purim, on Shavuos, I was looking up a Sefer, the Re Ibn Shuib. For Benegay to Shavuos, I was looking for something, and I opened up Parshas Yisrael, and the beginning of the Parsha, he speaks about Ksiba Sefer Torah, and he says, Ksiba Sefer Torah, mitzvah gedoli yad ma'ayid, and he says, Acha Omer Olav b'medrash, he brings a medrash. Now, David Metzger is the Magia there. He has a number without any Makar. We don't have this medrash. In the Rishonim, we find many times that they had medrashim that we don't have, that we don't have access to. So we couldn't find this medrash, but the Ibn Shuib has this medrash, and the medrash says someone who dies and he doesn't have and he doesn't leave over there is no yavam to be miyabam as ishtai. They should be makdish a sefer Torah leheichel. So he's talking about the greatness of the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah, that the kiyama mitzvah of being makdashis a Sefer Torah is meishiv nefesh l'makayma, that nefesh of this person who dies without any children. So this was like unbelievable. Like, first of all, I didn't understand what's going on. What is the Indian? But you see over here that here's a Makayr, a Medrash, and Chazal talking about the Chashivas of being Makdash Sefer Torah L'il Neshama. Now it's interesting because I bring in the Sefer at the end of the Simon that the Chavetz Chaim in the Sefer Shem Eilam, he is not very pro the Indian of writing a Sefer Torah L'il Neshama. He says, you have people Nebuch don't have children and they want to do something. And he says, even those who want to be Menadav a Sefer Torah, it's Marbek, the Kedusha, it's a wonderful thing. But he says that's not what the Navi tells us to do. It's not the Torah Hashkafa in what a person should be doing in this situation. Look in the Navi. The Navi says, Va'al Yoima Hasar is Heinani Eitz Yavish. So you see that Shmir Shabbos is what he should do. Now we have the Kevurah Medrash now, the Ibn Shuib, so the Chavetz Chaim didn't have access to the Sefer, but the Ibn Shuib brings a Medrash that in this situation, Sefer Torah is what is going to be Meishav HaNefesh L'Makayma, which would be his tikkun. And I started looking into the Indian, and it's more obviously a Kabbalistic Indian if it's Meishav HaNefesh L'Makayma, but looking in the Makairos of the Indian of Yibum and Sefer Torah, everything seems to fit into place that the Nefesh doesn't have that Menucha, the Neshama, because it doesn't have that Kiyum in the Eilam. It doesn't have that Hemshech in the Eilam. So it doesn't have that Menucha to go back L'Makayma wherever it's supposed to be in Gan Eden. That until there's a mitzvah yibum, the Zayah says even if there's no yibum, so then somebody else there's that nefesh is meshaited ba'olam until somebody else comes along and is misakin that nefesh and it finds a mokum to be in schaber. But writing a sefer Torah and being makdash leheichel, that schus will will be a tikkun for the shaman and be meishav hanefesh l'mekayim. And it's interesting. I didn't see any place in bringing this. They all bring that it's a bigger schus. If you're talking about schusim, I saw someone even asks. Most shuls have separate Torah. So what happens if somebody comes and he donates a sefer Torah? So they make it tonight that for the first year they're going to use the new sefer Torah. So he says, what's the big schus? What's the schus to read from that sefer Torah? We have separate Torah. Nobody needs your sefer Torah. So is there any schus in reading from your sefer Torah as opposed to the other ones that are being left in the Arna Kodesh? Now that's only a question if we're dealing with the schus of using the sefer Torah. But from this medrash we see there's a different inyan here. The etzem inyan of being makdash a sefer Torah lehechel. Siva sefer Torah, the skula, it's a skula more than a schus. The skula of the mitzvah is a great segula that is a great tikkun for the neshama. Now, I don't know if that applies to people that have children or not, but at least it's a makayr for this inyan.
I want to mention about the Rebbe Shuaib. He was a Talmud of the Rashba. It's interesting. The first edition was printed in Krakow in 1573. So it was, I don't know if the Chofetz Chaim had access to it. I mean, theoretically he would have. It was around. It's not. There wasn't. There's a newer edition now. Actually, it's not around today. It was redone. I think
it's out of print, right?
Yeah, it's out of print. Unfortunately, it's a 2-volume, nice prints and basic notes, but it's not around now. Unfortunately, yeah. So that's just to mention that. Now, one other question being that we're a Svarim chatter. What about? Did you come up with anything about? What about dedicating a sefer? Someone paying for a sefer, Lil Neshama, rather than a sefer Torah. Obviously, there's the rush about.
Right, so that's what the place can bring.
Yeah,
that's what the place can will bring. That it's better to give svarim and Rabbi Yosef holds that especially if it's if it's something which is lahalacha, or if it's a ksav yad from something that hasn't been printed, and now you are enabling its access to everybody. That's going to be a bigger schus than sefer Torah. But again, that's going along with the same understanding that we're looking for what's a bigger schus. What is accomplishing more? So that's if you're looking for what's a bigger accomplishment in terms of schusim. So then writing svarim that are going to be used, dedicating svarim kisvayadis are going to be a greater schus. But what we are bringing out over here is that you find here that there's something in the skula of the mitzvah, not in the schus. The schus anachanami. Maybe no one's going to use the sefer Torah. No one's going to read from the sefer Torah. But the Medrash is saying when you put the Sefer Torah, you makdash, you write a Sefer Torah, it creates Kedusha Sefer Torah. Putting that in the Heichel, being makdash that in the Heichel, that is something that has an effect, a tikkun on the neshama.
Right, exactly. Listen, that's something, it's an interesting thing. So there definitely is a schos, a big schos, just to mention, like you're saying, to print svarim, especially kisvayad, or other svarim, or, there's many, I'll just say it here, as again, the svarim guy, there's a lot of svarim of Gdolei Achronim and various others that are just not around, not in print, whether it's a Ksav Yad or just even actually they were printed once upon a time. Everyone forgot about it. It's not a nice edition, not a nice print, something like that. It's much cheaper than a Sefer Torah oftentimes. I shouldn't say always to do, and people can do something like that and really have a big schus for someone they're trying to print it for, Lila Neshama. Now, at the end of the Sefer, you have a couple of things that you kind of lump it together. Simon Yud Beis, Arus Umar Makamis Ben Yonim Shaydim. So I'll mention some. I don't know if you want to mention. One is Kevurah Mishpacha, which we already spoke about, really. One is in Inyan, in Omer B'fnei Meis El Dvar Shal Meis. In front of a Meis, you should only say things of the Meis. Inyan, you talk about Hesped, you talk about Avelus, Initial Kavod Meis, V'le Initial Tsar, Avelus Shiva, Sugi de Meis Potem and Amitzvus, Hadlokas Ner Neshama, and Tchias HaMeisim. So, yeah, maybe talk about the Ner Neshama for a minute. I think that's something that's interesting. I remember a couple years ago there was a whole sefer came out on this topic. Actually, I remember someone wrote a whole Ganza sefer. But that's an interesting thing that comes up. Just writing a Ner Neshama, and just lighting one, a yard side candle, and also putting a Ner by the kever that people are knowing to do as well.
I'll just bring some of the Makayos that you that there are some early Makayos for this. The Meiri and Erevin. One of the studies there that whatever we're talking about over there is the mokim which they would light the nair next to the kever, which I thought that was an interesting mokim that you have in the Rishonim already learning it in our sugya. That's according to the Meiri, that's shot in this Gemara. That was already the minute back then that they would light a nair there. And I just bring the Makarios like who speaks about this I came across.
Okay, and I mentioned the other topics, and you can check it out. We don't have to really go through. I think we discussed various different things. So, and your makairis that you use generally for the sefer, I guess, is what you've been saying, anywhere and everything, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I have my go-to where I, start with, if it's something that is negay in the paiskim, so you start looking in paiskim, and they bring different makairis. In things that have to do with like a hashkafa thing, I like to look in the Radvaz's Metzudas David. He brings, Api Pshat, Remesh, Drush, Say, he brings everything. So that's a good starting place. Actually, I use the Turiel one. He was just nifta last week. And he does a great job, a fabulous job. His makairis are always to the point, and it's a very chashuv sefer. Teres HaMincha is something I use a lot. The Teres HaMincha also Tamar Rashba, also a lot of chashuv yedias and the way he deals with things. There's actually, we didn't mention it, but he says a fascinating idea about going to kevarim. He says that, forget about davening by kevarim. He says that the nefesh stays by the kever, and when a person goes to the kever, there's pashat hana. It's a hana for the chaim, it's a hana for the mesim, that you're coming and you are connecting again. It's a way to connect. I saw that Yoshe Soloveitchik, they say that when his wife was nifta, he would go every Friday afternoon. He would go visit her there by the kever. Yeah, and others, of course, there's something real. So the Talmud Rash is saying that is the inyan, and he explains about it. He says that's why you find that tzaddikim u'meisen nefesh to go to Eretz Yisrael, to go to the Mokum HaKaisel. What are you going to the Kaisel for? What's there? There was a Churban Abayis. There's nothing left. So he said that. So he says because the same way that when somebody dies, so there's nothing there, but there's still a nefesh that stays there. He says the same way by the Kaisel, the Shechinah is still there. There's something still there. And going there, connecting with whatever is left over there is a hano for the Chaim and the Mason.
Yeah, you mentioned, by the way, you mentioned Ramesh Surreal, who was just nifter, and you mentioned his edition. He published many svarim. You mentioned that sefer of his. Now, I want to also talk about. Yeah, I wanted to ask you that the sefer itself. I mean, who are you intending the sefer for? Who do you think the target audience is? It somebody who, unfortunately, Leilenu has someone who's nifter, he's an avelis, he's trying to go through these sugyas, or is just meant for anyone to pick up and learn these sugyas? A lot of these sugyas, like we talked about, davening by kevarim, has nothing to do with, it's just that's a sugya comes up all the time, going to a kever, davening by a kever, Yerusha, some of these other kevarim of Rabbanus, it's an interesting sugya to go through. Are they just meant for someone just to go through the sugyas?
So obviously, I would hope that anybody will pick up the sefer, and not only someone who is dealing with this, but the truth is that people generally don't think in these terms, of connecting with it. They are maybe even afraid of the topic of Mason until they have to deal with it, and they start grappling with some of the issues that exactly what is the relationship now? Is there a complete disconnect? Is there any connection? Do they know anything? How am I supposed to relate to them now that they are gone? So definitely there's more of an interest for people that have been through the sugya of Avelis. But the sefer is not an Avelis. There's no Kepedas to learn the Sefer. No one has to worry about any of some Sefer's Kepedas or things like that. Very little on Avelis. It's primarily on other things, which is negated to everybody. And I would think people, either a Talmud Chacham who wants to see the entire Sugya, or people that, want to be able to find Makairis, when there's a bigger Sugya out there, not just what's brought in Mishnah Berurah and Chai Adam, for example, so they want to have access to the entire sugya. I would think that they would find something in the sefer.
Okay, great. So I'll try to find the link to the sefer. It can be purchased online, but I'm pretty sure it's still available in Svarim stores. You can check it out. It's a blue sefer, and so for that. And thank you, Rabbi Sofer, for joining me to discuss.
Thank you again for having me.